Hello, my name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight my guest is Augustin Augie Rivera Jr. He's a candidate for the 148th District Court in Nueces County. Is that right, Mr. Rivera?
That's right.
So, what have you been doing? What have you been doing for a living? Where have you been working?
Well, for the last 28 years, Mark, I've been a lawyer practicing here in Corpus Christi. You asked me what I've been doing. I've been doing a lot. In addition to being a lawyer, I'm a father. I've got 4 children with my wife, and our kids are aged 20, 18, 15, and 10. So a lot of soccer games, a lot of
sure
t-ball
of that.
games, Boy Scout meetings, debate workshops, all of that. And for the last, I guess now 9 months, I've been running for this office pretty hard, trying to spread the word as to why the voters out there who are going to be going to the ballot box soon, early voting starts October 20th and election day is November 4th, why they should vote for me for the 148th District Court.
Who's your opponent?
My opponent is Judge Guy Williams. He's the incumbent.
And he's a Republican, you're a Democrat,
He's a
correct?
Republican and I'm a Democrat, and I've got a couple of things to say about that. You know, anybody who knows me, Mark, knows that for the last 27 and a half years, in addition to being a hardworking lawyer, always representing my client zealously and doing the best job that I could, that I've also committed time and effort to the profession. From the very beginning, as soon as I got back as a young lawyer, I worked with the Volunteer Lawyers Project, did some pro bono assistance. I soon got involved in organized bar activities, and eventually I served as the president, one of the youngest presidents ever of the Corpus Christi Bar Association. My bar work continued on to the state level. I've been on a couple of state bar committees, including serving on the Litigation Council, which is like the board of directors for the litigation section of the entire state bar of Texas. And recently, 3 years ago, I took a whole nother turn with my commitment and service to the bar. The Texas Supreme Court, which the last time I checked, they're all Republican, right? The Texas Supreme Court appointed me to the Texas Board of Law Examiners. And so since 2011, I've been one of the 9 lawyers in the state of Texas responsible for putting together the bar exam and administering it twice.
Is that right?
That's right.
That's very interesting.
And
Is it still two and a half days? Excuse me.
it's still a 2.5-day exam, although, you know, this is interesting. I'm not going to ask you when you took the bar exam, but
In the 80s. In the 80s?
but they didn't have laptop
In the
computers.
80s.
No laptop computers.
No, we
back
didn't have
then.
any of that.
Well, what I can tell you is that today, that probably about 2/3 of everybody that takes the bar exam does it on a laptop computer. And so
Isn't that something?
it's amazing.
That's really something.
But in addition to helping put the bar exam together, writing a couple of questions for the bar, my duties also include going up to Austin on average once a month
You get paid money for that?
We get paid a stipend.
Oh, you
small
do?
Stipend,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I was just being facetious because I think of myself such a street lawyer, you know, hustling and getting clients in and trying to make money, and I've kind of avoided a lot of that sort
Sure.
of thing, and that was why I was asking. I said, my gosh, how are you going to run a business and be able to do all that sort of thing? I think you're with a law firm, correct?
I am. I'm with a small civil trial boutique, Dunn, Weathered, Coffey, Rivera, and Casperitas.
You're a civil defense firm primarily, right?
Primarily
Insurance defense.
civil trial, civil appellate.
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed through the years because I do, you know, on and off. Well, it depends upon when you catch me, but sometimes I've done as much as a third of my practice has been personal injury, but I've never come against, you know, I've never been involved with your firm. I was kind of surprised.
Mm-hmm. We do. I mean, it's varied. I mean, we do primarily, I guess, what you would call defense work, but we do some plaintiff stuff, and then it's not all insurance defense. I mean, there's other kind of litigation that we get involved in, breach of contract stuff, commercial litigation.
Is your office? Where's your office at?
Right here on Upper Broadway. That's actually the front part. If you're going south on Broadway, away from the YMCA, but the back part of
Okay.
it is on Caronquist Street.
Okay, so you have an
two-story-
older. That's that older building too, right? Okay, similar to this one, but much
Right.
bigger. I'm assuming.
It's a little bigger.
Yeah, much bigger.
It's a little bigger.
Do the partners own the building? You have it set up as a separate corporation?
Yeah, it's owned by our name partner David Dunn.
Oh, okay.
Do you know David? David's name probably formed the firm back in 1988, I think, and but we've got David Dunn, Frank Weatherid, Larry Coffey, myself, and Pat Kasperitas and Paulie Dunn, and recently Tom Silver added on as one of our partners.
I tell the young lawyers who want to buy these buildings that don't do it. That's what I advise them. You know, it's such a commitment, and the upkeep is so much.
Sure.
And then rents since I've been in Corpus Christi, Texas, since December of '85, I'm not certain that rents have gone up a dime. You know, and our taxes and utilities, et cetera, have gone up so much that I wonder about the viability of these places. So
It's a challenge, but you ought to come by. It's a beautiful building. There's a whole history behind
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I noted it. It is a beautiful place. I think I may have been inside once to drop something off or something. So, so you're partners in that firm, correct?
That's right.
And I guess, obviously, your association with that firm would end if you win the judgeship,
That's
correct?
correct. That's correct. As you know, judges can't, and I get asked that question. You know, it's a legitimate question from folks who are not lawyers. They say, well, will you still be able to represent clients? And I said, I'm afraid not, you know.
The only exception to that I know is I think I've been in some of the small towns, and the county attorneys in some of the smaller towns could represent people. And I'm assuming I think maybe a JP here, if he or she's an attorney, right? I think
I'm not sure, but I think.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. Mrs. Rivera shaking her head up and down, saying yes.
I think that's right.
And the municipal court judges, can they
I think that's on a case-by-case basis.
That's on a
but I'm not
case-by-case
sure.
basis.
Some municipalities allow you to do that.
You know, right before the show, I was saying, boy, this guy's got some pedigree. Yale College, BA, Stanford Law School, JD, and then I was telling you my little war stories, how I had to go to a state school and then study hard, and then I could transfer to a better school and all that. And I went to University of Houston. What's it like at Yale? What's it like at Yale College? Because we have these stereotypes of what they refer to down here is a white Anglo. Well, let's just say this: there's these stereotypes in the movies and television, some sort of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant upper class culture that is very exclusive, fraternities, money, and snobbishness. Is that an accurate portrayal?
I think you're going to find, well, first of all, that's the stereotype. I'm the opposite of all of that. And second, I think you're going to find different kind of individuals like that at any school, wherever you go. Yale's a much different place than perhaps it was in the 50s and in the 60s. They really do a good job. I'm involved with Yale as an alum, and I do Yale interviews of students, local students who apply. As part of their application process, there's an interview. Again, I was there in the 80s. I was there between 80 and 84, and
That's about when I went to law school.
had much more humble beginnings than Yale. I was born and raised in Driscoll, Texas.
I was giving you a war story that I was there the other day for a case, and it's like, I read that it was 750 people.
And when I was there, it was like 600. So, you know, they've had a population uptick, but not much. It's still a small farming community that relies for employment. Folks have to rely on, you know, surrounding towns. But, you know, Mark, it was great growing up. You don't know what you don't have, you know. I mean, my parents, you may know my father, Gus Rivera. Gus was very proud of him. He was a working man when I was born. He and my mother were teenage bride and groom and didn't have any money, but they had a lot of hope and love in their pockets. And that's the nurturing environment I was raised in. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. My mother was my Cub Scout, pack mom, and my dad was my baseball coach. I wasn't very good at baseball, so I figured out I better hit the books. I loved to read at a young age, and they encouraged that, and so I did well in school. And again, you don't know what you don't have. And
many people don't have that.
And so
that's a
I
great
grew up
blessing.
with my parents steering me in the right direction, and they taught me, and it's not trite. I mean, it's not a soundbite. They really did teach me that education was the way to get ahead. And so I dedicated myself to that. I was a good student. I was a debater in high school. when I was a high school senior, class Bishop Small, in the class 2A, I mean, I was the UIL state ready writing champion. I won the UIL competition, so that was pretty big for me at the time. And when I was a senior, I applied to a lot of schools out of state, and I got the opportunity to go to Yale, so I went.
But I would assume that even in the 80s, the cost would be extraordinary.
It was. I was a financial aid and work-study student. I had to work my way through college and through law school. I mean, I didn't realize at the age of 18 that I was taking out a mortgage. You know, I mean, if somebody had explained it to me in those terms.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Yes.
It was worth it because it gave me an opportunity to go to one of the best universities in the world and made lifelong friends. I mean, I was a history major. I concentrated on American history, 20th century, and the professors and the students that I met were just, it was a phenomenal experience. I'm now proud to say that our eldest, our 20-year-old daughter, is actually attending Yale. She's a junior there, and she's having a great time as well. And she's a much, much more improved version of what I was.
So, well, I'm sure she has a lot of, obviously,
Right.
two parents who are attorneys. And
Right.
she has a lot of social advantages, and
She was, I got to brag, she was featured in the newspaper recently.
oh, okay.
She applied for and was awarded an undergraduate fellowship under a program at Yale known as the Yale Global Health Initiative. And so she went to Brazil for a month and looked at early childhood development programs there and did some on-the-ground research and had a great time and is now thinking of she'd gone up there with the idea of maybe becoming a doctor, and she's now looking at public health and global health, a career in global health. So we're excited for her, and so thank you for letting me brag as a proud dad.
Well, well, it's interesting she decided not to go into law, too.
We have 3 boys that are following, so we'll see. We'll see if any of them go to
I
the
hate
league
to
or
speak so cynically. I don't know that I would advise somebody to be a lawyer myself.
Maybe if nothing else, maybe in the short time we have this morning, I can reinstill your faith. Because look, people have asked me, why are you running for judge? And the first thing I tell them is, look, there's an incumbent, okay, and I don't believe in the politicizing of the benches. I really don't. Earlier you said, well, you're a Democrat and he's a Republican.
Well, I think it needs to be said. I think it needs to be said because they don't discuss it much, and it's
Right.
the truth. I don't know what to say. I don't know how politicized it actually is.
Well, anytime you come in as under a partisan banner, either Republican or Democrat, it's politicized.
That's right.
And in other words, what I meant by that was when I was encouraged by good friends and colleagues about running for the 148th, I said, I'm not going to do it just because the incumbent is a Republican and I'm a Democrat. And so I did my homework, and I can tell you about, the performance issues, including the case backlog that the court's been suffering from for the last, 3.5 years, that ultimately, helped me decide that, yes, I was going to run. But what I meant by that is that, when you go over to the courthouse, the judge doesn't say, well, I'm going to go to the Republican Party's set of law books, or I'm going to go to the Democratic Party set of law books. It's the law, and it's got to be applied equally and fairly every time.
At our level, though, I've often thought that the United States Supreme Court level, that it's totally politicized. Have you thought that?
Absolutely, because there are books and books written about that. But I'm not going for the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm running for what we call, as you know, you're over there like I am. It's the everyday court. I mean,
and that's what I was going to say. When we were talking about being a lawyer, that I wouldn't advise anybody to do it, and it doesn't mean that I'm cynical or anything. I just think in the professions, probably the medical profession too, it's just work.
Absolutely.
And you got to go to work every day.
Hey.
And you've got to grind out the cases, and you've got to produce. And this
that's what it is.
These imaginative ideas of glory or I don't know what to say. It's almost like some sort of archetypical idea that it's going to be so great. Well, it's just another job, and it's got advantages and disadvantages like every job. And so.
But
I don't know that we're. I think that a lot of us had, kind of glorious ideas when we started the profession that really aren't true.
Well,
That's what I thought. And that's what I think.
I still believe those aspirational.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, I do.
And-
That's why I'm running, because, and I've said this before, look, I've practiced trial law and appellate law all throughout South Texas. I've been in Hidalgo County, Starr County, Cameron County, Webb County, and all, Jim Wells,
Yeah,
Brooks.
I go primarily an hour around here, but
I
you
go,
know,
I've had
primarily.
cases in Victoria, all around South Texas, and sometimes, representing, defendants in tough cases, and I'm still not cynical. I still think
Well-
that, let me say this.
I'm not necessarily cynical about justice per se, though that's an issue too. It could be an issue because obviously you and I know that, like, let's say a plaintiff's lawyer, you could wind up, like, let's say, I mean that could be an issue, and you don't have to discuss this if you don't want, but obviously as a plaintiff's attorney, you could find yourself in a county that is not favorable to plaintiff's cases or to your case.
Mm-hmm.
And and if you can legally do it, you might try to forum shop it. So, in other words, try to pick a more favorable forum. So that's a reality, right?
Oh,
And that doesn't necessarily make you cynical, but it is a reality,
There are
correct?
strategy calls. Look, one of the things, I've got a long history of not only doing the best job for my clients, and I feel like I've developed a good reputation, a solid reputation amongst the bar for doing good work. I was named Outstanding Young Lawyer in 1997 or 98. A few years ago, I got the Judge Paul Nye Professionalism Award. These aren't awards that I went out and sought. I was nominated for that. I guess last week, the bar poll results were released, and I got
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
received 64%, of the lawyers'
Yeah,
votes.
I don't remember if it must have been online and I missed the email or
Don't
something.
tell me you didn't vote, Mr.
I don't
Picardo.
think so. I think I must have missed the email.
Well,
So I was surprised when I saw the results.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
you did real well on that.
I
and,
did, and so I think that I think people know me. I think they know who I am. I point to my peers and the recognition by my peers as somebody that they can trust. But in addition to all that, I've had a very, very involved commitment to the community. I didn't just let my children participate in t-ball or chess or soccer. I coached them, and so I'm just as proud of the pictures on the wall of all the different teams that I've coached for 14 years. But where I was going with this is that when my he's now 18 and he was then in the second grade, when my son Miguel came in and said, "Dad, I want to play chess. And I want to go to a chess tournament." Well, I don't know if you play chess or not, but
I did one years ago.
I did years ago as well. But
Now I've got to save my brain for my occupation, right?
no, see, so
I think
let
so.
me encourage you to, because
Oh.
knowing chess and playing it actively actually keeps the mind alert and moving and engaged.
Oh,
and there are studies that
I'm
show
like-
that
I'm like at 100%. I don't know, at least 10 hours a day. I don't know, but you
Well,
could be correct.
so-
That's
so-
interesting.
So in where I was going with this, back to the point you made about whether strategy calls that we make as lawyers
Right.
every day. Do we go to this venue, that venue, and what do we file, what do we not file? Relearning chess with my children helped me become a better lawyer.
Well, that's interesting.
Just because, and it's all about strategies. Now, of course, that's why it's important, and I think you'd agree with me. I think any lawyer out there would agree with me. That's why it's important to have a good, competent, fair, balanced judge on the bench. Because when you do all this research and you think you have a good strategy and you think it's based on the law, you want to go in there and have a judge who can appreciate it.
I'm going to say this cynically, not meaning any bad thing about a judge or something, but I used to do all this research, and you give it to the judge and this and that, and then you wonder if they read it.
I'll read it. I will read everything that gets filed.
You know,
That's the job of the court.
And
So again, I'm trying
And the
to.
judges are given so much leeway under what's called abuse of discretion, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, he didn't abuse his discretion, so okay.
Right,
Well,
right.
right? How many times do you see that in the Court of Appeals?
Yeah.
Well, I had 15 minutes for voir dire on a personal injury case, but no
But
abuse
there's-
of discretion. Okay.
Well, it's not just the abuse of discretion. Remember, you've got to show that it had a material impact on the outcome of the case. So, I mean.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, so it's.
So that's the standard. So hey, just
And
don't
look,
research it. No,
as-
I'm just kidding.
As we've
I'm
talked
kidding.
before,
you know.
I mean, as I've said
Yes, sir.
before, there's no perfect trial. It's.
Well, that's going to
and
obviously.
I mean.
And it's hard for the lawyers too because we're emotionally involved and we're seeing that viewpoint only. So
But-
the judge is sitting up there seeing everything. So yeah,
So-
obviously that's
So there are
true.
mistakes made, but the point is that a good judge will make sure that you get from point A, okay, in the case, it begins many times with pretrial discovery issues, on through the motion practice, up to the jury selection.
That's just
and,
killer.
The job of the judge is to make sure that the case gets from point A to point B with no reversible error. And
Well-
doing that means being fair and making judgment
But-
calls.
But there is an issue regarding reversible error versus, obviously the judges don't want to be reversed on appeal, but then there's an obvious idea whether or not there's a fair trial is a different question though, isn't it?
That's why I said, I mean, to do that, to make sure that the case gets technically tried correctly, but also that it's fair to all sides that are in the court.
You know,
See, I've said this on the campaign trail as well, and I mean it. It's not just that's why I brought you one of the president's messages that I wrote, because the things that I'm saying today are not things that I developed as a politician. A lot of the beliefs that I've been expressing have been heartfelt and have only been reinforced, over time. And I've said this before, due process is not something that, first-year law students talk about with their professors in the ivory tower. Due process is something that happens every day in these courtrooms, and that's why it's important to have somebody who's knowledgeable.
and what is due process?
Due process is making sure that everybody gets the right to be heard, that they get all the rights that they're entitled to under the law.
And I think there's substantive due process and procedural due process, correct?
That's right.
What's the difference?
What's that?
What's the difference?
The difference between substantive due process
Yeah.
and procedural? Procedural due process
Yes, I'm
refers
sorry.
more to making sure that there is nothing in the procedure, that the case is tried, that you follow, because of course, there are the rules
Mhm.
of civil procedure or the rules of criminal procedure. So you
Yes.
want to make sure that procedurally everything works the way that it should. Substantive due process, you apply the substantive law to a particular case and make sure that, again, the litigant or the defendant, the criminal defendant or the civil litigant is getting all the rights they're entitled to under substantive due process.
Do you think, so I think we've been practicing almost the exact same time.
Sounds like it. It
Sounds
sounds like
like
you were a little bit more ahead than I was.
But you think that there's been, do you think the American citizen has the substantive due process rights they had when we started practicing?
Gosh. You know, that's a good question.
I'm going to say I don't know how you think they could, given
Well,
the abrogation and rights about, we're going to repeal this part of the Miranda rights, and then we're going to repeal this part about the confession. Actually, though,
What-
one interesting point, not meaning to interrupt you, that I don't know the average
I'm
person.
going to let you handle this one.
The average person knows about the discovery laws passed for the criminal cases by, I think, a Republican legislature, right? I'm assuming, have really, I think, helped a lot regarding due process and your rights to due process in the state of Texas. Would you agree?
I would.
That was a pleasant surprise. It came from left field.
It was, well, not so much left field. It was the result of the very, very, the cause celeb. I mean, the Michael Morton case that came out.
So tell us about the Michael Morton case.
Well, that's the case, and what I know is what I've read in the newspaper. What I was going to say was
I'm
the
sure.
only reason I hedged is because, as a judicial candidate, I mean, even candidates are subject to the Code of Judicial Conduct. And so I've got to be careful about, speaking about matters that could appear before the court someday. And, I mean, Has no judge or judicial candidate ever told you that?
Yes.
I can't
No,
express
the only reason I was
opinions.
narrowing my eyes a little bit is I said, well, how could that come before the court someday? The idea that your due process rights have been abrogated the last 20, 30 years.
I'm just telling you, I'm getting close to the fence. I see it
Okay.
coming.
No,
and,
that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I understand that.
Because, I mean, I wouldn't be able to publicly, I think, take a position on, what I feel,
No,
could happen to
obviously,
the
and for the ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Rivera didn't know the questions, and this
Yeah.
shows contemporaneous, extemporaneous, and people are nice enough to come on usually in that format, so I
Sure.
do appreciate that.
No,
So if
no,
there's
that-
anything that you feel uncomfortable about, you just let us know. So,
I'd be happy to privately, one-on-one.
Right.
But I've got to be careful just as
Certainly.
much as I can. But the Michael Morton case, of course, was the case that came out of Williamson County, where the gentleman was indicted and tried and convicted of murdering his wife, and came out many years later that with contemporary modern day DNA testing that it couldn't have been him, and he was exonerated. And then it turns out that there was evidence that had the exculpatory evidence that had been withheld by the prosecution that could have changed the course of the trial.
I'm going to say something favorable about our local criminal and district attorneys since I've been practicing. Unlike other counties that I've seen, both under Carlos Valdez and under Grant Jones and under Mark Skirka, they have had an open discovery
Well, and certainly
procedure.
you do. I know you do work over in federal court
Yes.
as well, and of course the Brady rule over in federal court
Federal court, the last 15 years, though, has gotten more difficult locally because they don't allow you to make copies. Did you know that? You got to go over there and look at the file and write this stuff down. That's enough to drive, that's enough to drive you crazy. But in state court, our district attorneys have maintained that, and I always thought it was wise. I said that way they could handle the cases. They don't have all these discovery disputes and et cetera. But not all the counties did that. And when people even used to complain about some of the, before this law now, I don't know if it would make that much difference now, but they would complain about some of maybe Mr. Valdez when he was district attorney. I said, look, we could do far worse if they refused to give us the police reports, which they could have done legally prior to this Morton. Is it called the Morton rule?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know the exact.
Okay, right.
That's.
I mean, they could have done that. So, but you're not doing. You haven't done really much in the way of the criminal realm, right? Since you've been practicing.
My focus has been in my practice primarily on civil trial and some administrative stuff. I mean, school law. But
you do some of the school law cases.
Yeah. But I've been in federal court and in state court. Municipal court, JP court. I mean, I've done it all every level, county court, up through the Court of Appeals and the Texas Supreme Court. I've had some cases up there. I actually have some criminal law experience. It's mostly been on the pro bono side of things. We all have family, and so, or friends.
Or friends.
And I've handled.
I got picked up on a DWI.
I've handled several criminal law matters, and it's interesting because one of the cases that I had was in municipal court, in the environmental court. And
I haven't. That's the one court I haven't made it to the environmental court yet. What is the environmental court?
Environmental court handles things mostly like junk vehicles or. I guess when you have overgrown weeds on your property
Oh, is that
or
right?
improper.
I thought maybe it was a bigger deal. I thought maybe it was oil pollution from the refineries, et cetera.
These are misdemeanor. Remember, it's municipal court.
Okay,
So they're class C
okay,
misdemeanors.
all right.
But one of the cases I tried, I mean, so that you talk about impact litigation in municipal court. I was representing a landowner who was being prosecuted for violating an excavation permit ordinance. And complicated story, but he had donated some land out on the island to help with the building of a school out there. And there had been some excavation that took place on his property, and he was being prosecuted for not having an excavation permit. I sat down and I looked at the ordinance and determined that this is pretty vague. We get to this substantive due process stuff, okay, that we were talking about earlier. I said, who's supposed to be, who's responsible for obtaining the permit? The landowner, the beneficiary of the excavation, the contractor who's doing the excavate. I mean, it didn't make sense, Mark. So I went in there and I briefed it. I argued in pretrial that the case should be dismissed because the ordinance was overly broad, too vague, and therefore it was unconstitutional. And guess what? I won. And the ordinance was invalidated.
You know why you're saying it like that? And guess what? You won because you know it almost never happens.
Well,
90% of the time, the judge is not going to rule that an ordinance is unconstitutional, right?
well,
And was the other side able to appeal it, or did they
not appeal
bother?
it. They didn't
Okay.
bother. The city,
Okay,
the
now
city-
is there
the city-
judicial precedent or stare decisis that could be used? No, I guess not, because
Well, it
it's
should be. I mean, that particular ordinance
All
has
right.
been declared unconstitutional. Now,
It's interesting.
And the reason it was significant was because of the potential fines. I mean, you were talking about, for every day, I
Oh,
forget
yeah,
what
they're
the
real
amount-
big, right?
Yeah, they were in the four figures. I mean, I forget what it was, 2,000 or 3,000. But anyway, it was a continuing violation. So
Mm-hmm.
this was potentially a big deal. And so, but I was right, and that was a criminal case. And then I was also appointed by the Fifth Circuit, the Federal Court of Appeals in
Yeah.
New Orleans, under their volunteer attorney project to handle 2 criminal appeals. One which was fairly significant. It was a 6-week criminal RICO trial that had been tried in San Antonio, and my wife still remembers. I mean, I was doing work at home, going through the transcript, and this was a huge deal. They had gone after alleged organized crime gang members, and so one of my clients, was accused of some pretty rough stuff. And so I'm reading the transcripts of the trial, and some of the testimony was pretty graphic. I mean, and there were a number of different defendants, and it was a complicated transcript to get through. And but I was trusted enough by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to handle these 2 appeals, even though they were in criminal law. Because in the end, I mean,
Well, yeah, I would say an appeal in criminal versus civil,
Yeah.
if it's very minor differences, especially I think in the Fifth Circuit. Did you get a chance to argue it up there in the Fifth Circuit Court?
I did not. I mean, that was the one perk, if you will, because I don't even know. I think since it was a volunteer thing, I think we got our expenses, for producing the brief taken care of. But,
Right.
And I don't think I got anything for any kind of hourly work or even.
I've had the.
But they said you get to go to New
Mhm.
Orleans to argue, and I
Right.
ended up having a conflict
Oh,
that day.
that's a
So one of my
shame.
law
Well,
partners got to go to
Yeah.
argue it, so I didn't even get that.
It's a beautiful courthouse.
It is,
you know,
absolutely.
um,
I've been there on a couple of other matters. I've been part of a team that presented oral argument to the court, but I've never actually argued to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. But it is a beautiful courthouse.
Yeah, I believe that I've argued twice up there through the
Mhm.
years. So you used to be Corpus Christi Bar Association President's Message, Faith and Vigilance. It's the opens. When did you write this?
That was back in 1998. In 97 and 98, gosh, how many years ago is that? I don't think our
16 years.
Mm-hmm. our outstanding video man here was even born back then. But
Probably
anyway. And I'm saying that as a compliment, okay? No, I want to say one of the youngest, I think maybe David Bright and one other former Bar Association president served around the time, at about the age that I did. And we used to be able to write editorials, professional
Mhm.
editorials. Do you remember we had a bar magazine that came out?
I remember, but you
Yeah.
know what? This is embarrassing to say. I wasn't a member of the bar for years. It used to be like you're starting off and it was like 250 or 350. It was more money, and it didn't seem like you received the benefits that you receive now with continuing legal education, et cetera.
Right.
But I do, now it's really good value for the attorneys.
Absolutely,
But
it is.
but back in the day, I don't know so much.
Well,
but I remember the bar magazine. Sure.
I'm glad it's improved. So I had the opportunity that year to sit down and reflect and write 4 different president's messages or columns for the bar magazine. And the first one was actually about how judges deserved our respect, and how respect for the judiciary was a shared responsibility between the bar and the judges. Okay, And I wrote an article where I actually said in print that we're endowed with the right to elect judges, but that as lawyers we need to be extra careful. We should be vigilant to not allow these elections to become politics as usual, and that's not always easy. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, I think that there are other states that judges aren't elected.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
Oh,
And there are
absolutely.
other states they're nonpartisan. You don't run
That's
under
right.
a republic. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Texas, I mean, the way we do it today with a political partisan race, that's the minority method of putting judges on the bench. And so I kind of see it like you've got two extremes, right? On the one hand, a pure appointment process where you let the executive, either the governor or the president, in all instances, make the decision. That's kind of got its issues, and we can look to the federal judiciary's experience over the last 20 years for evidence of that. And then on the other hand, you've got these just all-out, political partisan races. But there are methods in between, frankly, that bear some investigation. I understand that there was a legislative committee doing work in the off-season, that is during this past year, and that it may be something that the legislature takes up, in the next session. It's come up before, and
But do you know enough about politics to state that it really, at this point, that it really makes much of an impact upon the voters and how they vote? I know it did up until maybe 5 to 7 years ago, but now with the number of Republicans on the bench, et cetera, it wouldn't seem like the voters are actually looking that closely at political parties locally. Is that right, or is that wrong?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's something that's evolving, okay? Because I think there are going to be those that vote straight party ticket, one side, those that vote straight party ticket on the other, and how many in the middle are going to be independent and looking at voting for the person based on qualifications and credentials.
Let me ask you this, though. I don't know if you'd want to say, but I do think that at least regarding the judiciary, the whatever empowerment of the Republican Party has made for a better bench, better judges in Nueces County. And I'm going on that based upon the judges that sat when I first came to town in the 80s, that I think generally the bench is much better than it was. And so I don't, that's an observation, subjective, of course, but you don't necessarily agree that the empowerment of the Republican Party, at least regarding the judiciary, has created a better bench.
I think I leave that to the political scientists and political consultants, and just say that I have a lot of respect for anyone, Republican or Democrat or independent, that puts on the robe and gets on the bench, because it's a tough job.
Let's talk about and one of the things regarding the political parties is I think that generally speaking, if you run as a Republican, you get more money. Is that right?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's my I don't know. I don't know if
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that you get more contributions, or the party's more, and isn't that one of the, what about the, what amount of money does it take to effectively mount a race to run for district judge? Do you have any opinion regarding that?
No, hopefully it's as much as I've been able to raise. That's all I can say.
Would you want to say how much you've been able to raise?
No, I really don't know. Let me say this: we are truly blessed with good friends who, and contributions, from the smallest just to the largest contribution, it's all been appreciated. And I can say that we've gotten, I think our campaign finance reports are going to be due next week, and so there'll be, people will be able to see who it is that's been contributing to my campaign as well as that of the others. And,
contributions are limited to $5,000 now. Is that right?
$2,500, I think, per individual.
I don't know. Actually, I had the Texas Tribune, when I had Googled your name, came up with historical contributions, expenditures. I'm assuming that was, yeah, it's in this race. And some of them are $5,000. So Vincent and Elkins in Texas, 5,000.
That was for the Court of Appeals race.
Okay, so this is outdated, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great.
I think
I'm right on top of things. My research, no.
That database.
No, you told me yesterday you were coming on, so I didn't have too much time, you know.
I know. Look, there are no secrets about, I mean, my campaign has no secrets. Zero. I mean, you can go. I don't have a web page. What I have is a fan page.
You have a Facebook page,
right?
I looked at that.
Facebook. It's on my Facebook, my personal Facebook page, but I have a separate campaign fan page, and I've got credentials up there, and you can see who's liking me and who's not, and so and again, I mean, I'm one of the postings was of a recent event that I had where I had a list of a lot. I mean, a lot of hosts. Okay, and if you look at the list of hosts, you get an idea of folks that are supporting me, but. We've been very, very pleased and excited about the support that we've gotten all throughout the county, from dear friends and family in Driscoll and in Bishop, to good people in Robstown, to friends out on the island.
Unfortunately, in your town, the number of votes you could get is very limited from
every
Driscoll. I'm just teasing.
Every vote's going to count. This race was not won by a landslide last time. I think there were over 60,000 votes.
Yeah.
And it was a 3,000 vote or a little less than 3,000 vote
Who
difference.
did Judge Williams run against?
He ran against the incumbent, Judge Maricela Saldana. And so, what's going to happen in this race, we don't know, but we're excited about the support we're getting. One of the when I was asked to consider running, I made it clear that I was not going to do it just on a political basis. I didn't, it's not, hey, let's get all the Republicans out, we got to get them. No, I wasn't going to do that. Yeah, but Mark, when I did my homework and did my research as to what the caseload's been looking like over there, Judge Saldana actually had the court, the 148th was third best amongst the district courts in terms of least number of cases in the docket. And in the last 3.5 years, that number has ballooned, and it's now at the bottom. And so cases aren't getting worked. And what I tell people is that, look, you want a court that's going to be working as hard as you do.
I'm going to say something. I've been in courts before, So you're trying a whatever case, criminal case, right? And then the jury is in the jury room, and then the judge is taking pleas, and then, man, if they process too many cases at one time, it could almost be like a circus.
You've got to have a balance.
And I've been through that before. I say, well, I don't think that we should be having these pleas in here, and then you've got this jury in here, and then the jury's coming in at 12:30 today, so we hear the pleas in the morning, and then I say, man, that is, that's a really a big city thing, and I think that can, I'd say that, but actually in Houston, I don't think the dockets are as busy as they are here. Mm-hmm. And I think for a while, I don't know if it's still the case, there was some sort of competition amongst how many cases the judges could move. It's just through, I don't pay that much attention, but for a little bit I heard or something. So I think it could have the opposite effect too, that, there has to be some degree of whatever judicial decorum
Absolutely, and there've been other issues and questions raised. I mean, I went around before I made my decision, and I talked to colleagues who practice family law. I talked to colleagues in the criminal defense bar. I talked to prosecutor's office. I talked to the probation department. I mean, all just friends who I wanted to get a sense for. Well, how's it going in there? And I can do a better job. And that's why that's why I decided to take on the challenge of an election. Elections aren't easy.
No, and I was going to say that. I was going to say, I'm reading this stuff. We're at Whataburger Field, and we're doing this, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, right. I'd want to do that. And then you got to say,
well, you should have.
And then you got to make small. Then you got to go. You make a small talk with everybody, right?
Well, it's not small talk.
But sometimes you don't ever get like say, well, I don't feel like talking to anybody. Maybe that's just
not yet. No, because let me tell you why. I mean,
You're a very well adjusted man, so you can do
well, no, I
that.
have
Me, I'd say, hey,
Look,
okay, I don't feel like,
in 2004. In 2004, I got the chance to deliver the keynote address at the Latino Law Students Association at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. And I'll be honest, I wasn't their first choice. I mean, a judge friend of mine was going to give the keynote address and had a conflict at the very last minute.
that's the
And-
law school in Houston.
That's correct.
It started off as a minority school.
Right. And so this was again 10 years ago, okay? And so, but my judge friend tells the president of the group, you need to call Augie Rivera. He can come do this, stop what he's doing on a dime and come help you. So I did. And I said, look, I mean, I gave him a nice talk, and I told him, I said, if there's one thing I can tell you, and this is why I was smiling earlier when you said your view of I share your view. I mean, I said, the profession you're about to join, the profession you're about to join has a legendary history and a wonderful past, I mean, a storied past, and people still have romantic visions of being a lawyer. But let me tell you, from somebody who's been doing this for a while, it's a grind. It is an
Yeah,
absolute,
it's a grind.
It's
Just
a
a work-
job, it's a
another
work.
job.
You gotta do it, and so you've gotta find something in your life that gives you balance. For some people, that's faith. For some people, that's family. For some people, that's friends. For other people, it's hobbies. But whatever you do, I said, make sure you stay grounded, because our profession, unfortunately, Mark, it suffers from folks who break down and who aren't, who try to find
Well-
solace in things that aren't so healthy and destructive. So
Well, what you're saying is, I think I have personal knowledge based upon what I've seen. A lot of lawyers drink too much, right? Is that right?
It's a fact of life. It's
Yeah.
and it's a fact.
And then
of
I don't know
profession.
about the
It's
other
good.
substance abuses. I don't know.
Any high stress, job in our profession can be high stress. Any high stress profession, has a tendency to break that way, and that's unfortunate. So all I was trying to say was, look, find something that makes you happy. And so my point is that if you think being an active trial lawyer like you've been, and like I've been an active lawyer every day, having deadlines and hearings to go to and trials to prepare for, try to do that and then put on top of it this crazy thing we call a political campaign. And I will tell you, and I've got to.
Well, I'm sure it's very difficult. Are you maintaining a full practice while you're running
Sure.
too?
Sure. I mean, I was
it's really
able
tough.
to over the summer,
Mm-hmm.
resolve some matters. I mean, through ADR. A lawyer
Alternative
asked me,
dispute
through
resolution.
mediation. A lawyer asked me the other day, what's your philosophy on mediations? And I said, well, look, I think most courts these days encourage it. I mean, for the last 20 years, that's been
I think that if you became a judge, I interrupted you, I'm sorry,
No,
but
that's
if you
fine.
became a judge, some of the judges on civil cases order mediation. Would you order mediation? Would it be part of your, what do they call it, docket
standard
control?
docket control.
Yeah,
I would.
docket control order.
I would, and unless the lawyers told me up front and were able to convince me that this case is never going to settle, it's irreparable. But I've got to tell you, I've been, I entered the practice of law right about the time that the Texas Supreme Court and the State Bar of Texas were emphasizing mediation. Right
Okay.
about the time. So when Steve Fieldcamp began, Judge Fieldcamp began his mediation.
Is he still practicing?
I don't know. I think
I
he's
haven't heard.
he's an ordained minister and doing that part of his life now.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but when Judge Fieldcamp did that, I remember being, a young lawyer in there with cases. I've taken many cases to mediation that I thought were absolutely hopeless, and we were just going through the motions, and we ended up working them out, and for all sorts of reasons. There have been others that I thought this should
right,
settle, and they
right.
don't.
And I've been ordered a mediation before. I said this is going to be a waste of time. I think I've settled. I would say this for mediation. I had a case recently that we went to mediation, didn't settle at all, and then, after judges, I would say 95% of the time I have settled my civil cases in mediation. 95% of the time.
Oh, that's high. See,
Yeah, I would
and the
say
whole point
so.
is that it's not only, and there's some that say, well, I don't want to go to mediation unless I'm absolutely, well, mediation makes common sense. And so I don't know why parties wouldn't want to try that, before having to go to the courtroom, because, the mediator's spiel, each and every time, which we've heard countless times, you and I, is you can't control what happens at the courthouse. You're putting your fate in the hands of the jury. Who knows what's going to happen? Even if you win, it could be appealed. And so
Well, and that's absolutely true.
what you want is closure, then today is your day.
Yeah, some of the mediators are better than others. Some know the facts better than others.
Some are more effective.
And some of them have practical experience in, both sides of the bar, and others don't. So
Right.
The thing that's a little bit disappointing about mediation to me is pretty expensive,
It can be. And,
You know,
and I'm
it's
concerned about that.
yeah,
Not only as a
it's a high
practitioner,
cost.
but I am concerned about that. I understand.
They had some sort of a mediation thing in the Nueces County Courthouse for a while that
They
had.
did. But I don't think the
They-
mediators were required to be lawyers, and
Right.
they just went through they went through training, but I tried it a few times. And
How about mediation in family law cases? Does the 148th do family law?
they do? That's the thing about this.
So how are
court.
you going to listen into those cases? That's going to
I'm
be
ready
a thrill
for it.
you.
I'm ready for.
I
I've
know
handled
that's
family
gonna
law
be a-
cases. Again, my-
I've done maybe 3 because, it's the friends deal.
Well, for me,
Somebody,
it's the family deal.
a girlfriend's sister, something, one of
Hey,
these deals.
I'm with you. So I've handled family law cases. In fact, recently, and I'm ready to go out. I'm
Boy,
ready to get
that's
in there
gonna
and
be-
help. What I was going to. The
I'm
point
teasing because
No,
I've seen judges with looks on their faces hearing these disputes about, I want the silverware and I want the, almost ridiculous things, and the judge has to sit there if they're not settled and divide this stuff up. And I would think it would try one's patience. That's all. That's why I'm laughing and making these insinuations.
It's okay, because that's the job of a judge, to be patient through all, and I'm prepared to do that. The way you get through a political campaign that's challenging, and maintaining a busy law practice, still raising the 3 boys that are at home, helping my wife every day with daily duties of maintaining a household. The way I get through that is by having an awesome support team, and starting with my wife. Now, she's hamstrung. My wife, Juliana Syracuse Rivera, is a municipal court judge, and so there are things that she's prohibited by judicial ethics from coming out and being able to do for me, but she takes care of everything else. And so I couldn't do this without her, and she was the first one I asked. But then I've got my father, Gus Rivera, who's out there every day hustling for me, and 2 wonderful
How old's your dad?
in-laws.
How old's your father?
My father is now 72, 73.
Great, and he's still active and being able to help
Very
you.
much
Great.
so. And then I've got my father-in-law, Peter Syracuse, Dr. Peter Syracuse, who taught Spanish at Del Mar College for 30 years or so.
Mhm.
And wonderful story. He's Sicilian, and my mother-in-law is Peruvian. My mother-in-law, my dear mother-in-law, Luli Syracuse, is from Lima, Peru. And they had a chance encounter at Tulane University 53
Interesting
years,
story.
54 years.
Mhm.
Beautiful. For another
Interesting
time.
story.
But they're out there every day pitching me, and that's my support stuff, and that's how I stay balanced. And you just got to find the right balance, and that's how you're able to be as patient as you need to be.
Yes, we have had some of the judges through the years. Margarito Garza, God rest his soul, did not have the best reputation for being patient, right? And when I started and he would lose his temper and all that, I was kind of offended. But the longer I practiced, he mostly would lose his temper. Some of it was a little bit of an act. Like at the first time criminal defendants, the young people, criminal defendants, he would yell at them. And what he was trying to do was to scare them into not doing this again. So some of it was a little bit of an act, of his impatience. I don't know if it worked, but he gave it a shot.
He was on the bench for some time, when early in my career, and I appeared in front of him many times. And again, whatever he did, or however the career ended, I will say this: that for those who knew about his background and how well he was really quite brilliant and quite astute. Baylor Law School grad, and a lot of respect in the community, and so.
Well, right. He would have a tendency to say what he felt instead of thinking through it,
Right.
and saying the astute thing. And And I'd often hear him put all this energy into his criminal cases, and I'd say, well, gee, I would just take the plea and move on to the next person. I mean, you've got to process these cases to a certain extent. You've got to be, to a certain extent, judicial economy. As a matter of fact, he experimented for some time with not taking
plea bargains.
Plea bargains.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that?
I do. And so I mean, in other words, he had imaginative ways, and he was.
What did you think? What do you think of the plea bargain? Interrupting you because we only have 5 minutes left. And what do you think of the plea bargains? Sometimes I think there was a time when plea bargains were being, oh well, this is awful, these plea bargains, etc. I haven't heard that in the media lately. What do you think about the plea bargain and evaluating the plea bargains or accepting plea bargains for criminal cases?
Plea bargains have, I think, always been an essential part of the adjudication of criminal cases. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, and but again, you have to have, it comes down to this. I'm not the cynic because I happen to think that the system of laws that we set up, hundreds of years ago, work, and they work well. And I think that we've got a system of law that should, for the most part, work every day. It all depends on who you have on the bench. And unless you have somebody who's competent, who's measured, who's got experience, who's patient, then that's where you run into problems with, well, was this plea bargain right? I mean, you've got to have somebody who's able to discern. And that's a difficult thing to develop. And do I have that? Well, I hope I do. And when people ask me, well, how do you know you're prepared to be a judge? Because everybody says, well, I can be a judge, or, this elusive judicial temperament. Do you have the temperament to be a judge? Everybody says, well, I've got the temperament. Well, I can say that, but I always point to at least three things. I said, if you want to know whether you can trust me to do the job, then go talk to any one of the numbers of parents whose kids I've coached in the soccer field, or in chess tournaments, or on the baseball field, or taken out on Boy Scout camps. They've trusted me with their kids because they know that I'm patient, that I'm not going to fly off the handle, and that I've got the temperament and demeanor to be a good adult leader or a good coach. Second, go ask my colleagues. Go ask fellow lawyers. I mean, who have worked with me in cases. Is Augie the kind of individual who's going to be a good judge? I think they'll tell you that. And finally, this is the point I started with. When the Texas Supreme Court appointed me to the Texas Board of Law Examiners, Mark, I didn't know. I knew that they put the bar exam together. What I didn't realize was that they're responsible for holding these character and fitness hearings. To become a lawyer in the state of Texas, you have to graduate from an accredited law school, pass the bar exam, and you have to be of good present moral character. And sometimes we have to, in closed-door hearings, and I've presided in hearings behind closed doors because they're confidential under law, over the issue of whether or not someone who's done all the other stuff, all the credential stuff, can become a lawyer.
We're down to 58 minutes, and I wanted to thank you for coming on,
Sure.
Mr. Augie Rivera, and judicial candidate for the 148th District Court. And so was there any litmus test that disqualified you from being a lawyer behind the closed doors? Was it second-degree felony, first-degree felony, or would everyone be considered no matter what their criminal background?
There are some, let me just say, everything is taken on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And it's all confidential and privileged, but the point is that in essence, I've been doing the work of this discernment, which I think every judge ought to do on the bench, again, behind closed doors, in Austin, because of the nature of the issue. But if the Supreme Court of Texas trusted me well enough to put me in the Board of Law Examiners, then anyone out there who's going to vote, and I hope you do vote, I hope everybody votes on November 4th, and I'm asking you to vote for Augie Rivera for the 148th, you can trust me as well.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Mark, thank you for the
Thank you.
time. I really appreciate it.
Good night.